Welcome into the Denver Sports Podcast. Hello, everyone.
What's up, friends?
How's it going?
Never been better. Each and every one of us, I'm sure.
All right, before we get going, WGT is the most popular golf game in the world, and they are the official gaming partner here at DNVR. This weekend, we are hosting our first WGT major, and there are some huge prizes. Don't miss out on this one. First place gets $200 cash. Second place gets $100 cash. Third place gets a DNVR shirt, hat, and sticker pack of their choice. Amazing. Those are all great prizes.
I mean, these are dangerously
third.
dangerously close to the perks of the job as it is already.
This is true. All three DNVR clubhouses will be able to participate. If you haven't joined a clubhouse yet, you can sign up and join DNVR 3 Clubhouse if you go to dnvrgolf.com. That's a DNVR 3. We are playing Beth Page Black Course. That's Beth Page. Write that down. And the challenge is closest to the hole. Whoever gets closest to the pin wins. It's that easy. The major will run from today to Sunday. So lots of time for you to get your best shot in. Good luck, everyone. That's pretty exciting. I actually might participate in this one, since there's a few prizes in there. I don't think I'm gonna do well, but at least it incentivizes me to be like, come on, Alec, get your ish together.
It's going to incentivize you to throw your phone across the room. That's the biggest shot of it.
That's probably true as well, but it's Feisty Friday, so you need to get feisty. Throw your phone across the room.
But it's free. It's free, so you're playing with house money.
Exactly.
What do we do if Harrison Wind wins? Does he get the money? Have we talked about that?
We haven't talked about this one. Wow. Well, that's a conversation we need to have outside of this. But welcome into the Denver Sports Podcast presented by Breckenridge Brewery. I've got their new Palisade Peach Wheat here. I'm really excited.
I like that beer. It's good.
Man, definitely should have been more prepared for this one.
Coffee.
I am your host, Allie Monroy, and with me today, I've got Zach Stevens, Drew Kreisman, Brendan Vogt, and AJ Hafley. The title of this podcast is Which Sport Puts the Most Pressure on Their Head Coach / Manager? So we're just going to jump. Oh, yeah, AJ. I knew this topic would be perfect for you for Feisty Friday, AJ.
All-time rant incoming.
So we're going to just jump right in. This topic came to me because Vic Fangio already has people calling for his job. Michael Malone had people calling for his job 2 series ago, and look at where they are. So I feel like it's just a good conversation to have, especially because each team's head coach manager does different things and has different roles. So we'll see what you guys come up with. Let's start. I don't know if we should start with AJ right away or go to him last. Look at that smirk that's going on his face right now. I'm like,
it doesn't matter. We can start wherever.
He's checking his iPhone notes. He's got this rant written down.
All right, AJ, let's start with you. Which sport puts the most pressure on their head coach?
Probably football. I mean, just
Easy
from
after
all that, like from an X's and O's standpoint, it's got to be football, because every play is literally just X's and O's and put onto the field and executed to a certain level. And you see that there are schematic advantages and guys get outcoached on a regular basis. Whereas you look at I would say especially baseball and hockey. How often do you make an argument that Bud Black got outmanaged tonight, or that Jared Bednar got outcoached tonight? I know that there's a certain subsection of Avs fans who think that happens every night, regardless of whether or not the Avs win or lose. But those people are just wrong, and they're going to have to live with themselves. So good luck.
AJ, I want you to go into, I know you chose football, but if you could kind of, for people who don't watch hockey, who are listening to this podcast, what does Bednar do on a day-to-day basis? You see, it's different than football and baseball as to how he coaches.
Yeah, so
hockey in general.
I always tell people that if they can tell me where coaching stops and playing begins, then they should be running a team. They should be choosing who the coach is. Because if you can do that, you're pretty incredible in hockey. Because the coach, like, he sets lines, right? He sets lines. They have a basic system that they run, and they just run it over and over and over and over and over to perfection. There's not a lot of planning for the opponent. There's not a lot of, like, in baseball, you at least have the shift, right? Where you're like, hey, have your defensive alignment based on this guy. There isn't a ton of that outside of line matching, where the coaches do want to put certain lines against, certain line matchups where you want good defensive players against the offensive players, and you want to put your better players against their weaker players, take advantage of them, blah 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 blah. Outside of that, though, not a lot. It's a lot of standing there.
And looking good.
In Bedner's case, standing there looking pretty good, looking fly. Well dressed goatee winner for a reason. Nice. So
I found that old clip for people listening and put it in our Slack of us announcing Jared Bednar as the winner of the Goatee's Best Dress, and I can't believe that was only 9 months ago, guys. Like, I feel like this year has flown by. And also feels like it's been like 10 years. Well, also.
Yeah, it feels like a couple of years ago, that's for sure.
For sure.
Even just in our world, so many things have changed. Like, we had 400 people crammed inside of our old office.
I know.
And now it's like...
Do you guys see that shot? We're all like literally like trying to make sure everyone's faces you can see. It was amazing. Maybe I'll tweet that one out. So you guys, or I can just bring it up right here. Let's see. Keep talking.
Yeah, so, he looks great on the bench when he just gets to stand there and not react to anything that happens. And he's very stoic, and I think that drives a lot of Avs fans crazy because they're pissed off throughout the game, and they want the head coach to agree with them. Mm-hmm. And he's very much okay, well, these things have happened. We can't control what's now in the past. We have to control how we react and move forward. And I think that's when it comes to finding a head coach that's going to win you a championship in the NHL, the hardest thing to do is to find a coach that can connect with your leadership group and kind of your core guys. And if he's able to do that, the X's and O's honestly kind of take a back seat. It's all about connecting and being able to communicate with your guys.
That was my big question for you, AJ, because it's really hard to answer because as media, we get behind a set of doors and we find there are more we're not allowed behind. But in the NBA, it is a lot of locker room management, ego management. I don't think we think of NHL guys in that same way, right? As far as like egos and diva personas or what. But it sounds like, like locker room management is a large part of the gig.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have like look at a guy like Nikita Zadorov, for example, the guy that everybody thinks Jared Bednar just hates. And because he holds him to a high standard of accountability, and it's like, look, he expects a lot from that guy. And so when Zadorov doesn't live up to it, Bednar's particularly harsh. He'll bench him. He'll healthy scratch him. He'll sit him after a period. Even if another defenseman goes down, he'll play with two defensemen short just to prove his point. So it's, with Bednar, he's very... He kind of draws that line, and he demands that accountability, and he has that, but he also has that relationship with Zadorov where he goes and he says, "Hey, this is a thing. Like, we need more from you. We need better from you. If you're going to hold yourself to a high standard, you can't play like you did last night." And that's sort of like that ego managing that you think about in the NBA that's so prevalent. You do have to do it in the NHL. It just looks a little different.
Yeah, I do want to use that opportunity to transition to basketball and Michael Malone specifically, because you do talk about benching a guy like Zadorov when he doesn't execute well. We see that a lot with Malone 2 games ago with Malone and Michael Porter Jr. and Adam. We were watching the game here, and Adam just saw that one mistake that Porter made, saw Malone be like, nope, that's it, and he did not play the rest of the game, just trying to teach him. Vogt, what do you think of that? And do you think there needs to be a little more of that, like, ego management on Malone's side?
Malone's quite good at it. I mean, I think it's interesting for a lot of the guys on the roster. It was a "I believe in you" thing. These guys weren't great or weren't necessarily considered franchise-altering prospects when they came to Denver. Gary Harris, who was actually already here, Brian Shaw did not believe in him, and a lot of Michael Malone's job was extending that leash and showing him faith. MPJ comes into this situation already knowing he's that dude, right? And he has that level of talent. And so I think Malone's looking at this as an opportunity to, if there's ever a chance to really coach this kid, as far as defensive principles and things that earn his trust, it's now. I mean, by the time he's scoring 25 points per game, it's going to be a little harder to nitpick. So certainly not a foolproof approach to MPJ. And plenty of people I've had their fair share of criticism, some of them valid. But it's really true that in the NBA, most of the gig, I think, is ego management. Part of what makes Phil Jackson, arguably the greatest head coach of all time, and I think it's been a big part of what Malone's done here in Denver. When they were in Las Vegas for Summer League, Malone was there, and he took the time to sit next to each and every player. The guys that weren't even playing, right? The Nuggets roster that was there just to watch. When Jokic is in Sombor, Malone makes the trip, and he goes and sees his horses. Went to Spain with Juancho. So his personal relationships with these guys, I think, matter more to him and really more to the results on the floor than necessarily in-game adjustments that he's making. In the playoffs, it becomes about, what are your rotations? What levers are you pulling? But what makes Malone a quality coach is all of these guys want to play hard for him. And he has taught them how to play for each other, which is something that sounds like an empty mantra until you come back from 3-1 twice in a row.
And might do it again.
Yeah, I mean, it bears fruit. So, in the NBA, I think it really is all about getting these guys to trust each other and play for each other in a time where individuality is placed increasingly on a pedestal.
I think you can see that with Nikola Jokic's comments after not yesterday's game, but game 2, or game 3, was it?
Yep, game 3.
Game 3. Oh my God, all these days are just like blending together. Game 3, when it was Malone's birthday, and Jokic was like, "Coach, I'm gonna get you a gift. We're gonna either keep going." Or was that game?
Yeah, he's well.
Or was that game 7?
The quote is, I think it was game 7. The quote is, "We're either going to keep
I apologize,
going,
guys. My brain.
We're going to get you home."
Yeah, we're going to get you home, or we're going to keep going. And they ended up winning game 7. That's what it was.
Yeah, I mean it's. I don't know. And Jamal Murray, who's a really competitive guy, who's harder on himself than anyone else, anyone in the media. Mike Malone's right there in terms of who's hard on him. They have a great relationship. They text each other all the time. And it's no accident that Jamal has discovered greatness. He always had it in him. Not all of us saw it there, but Michael Malone did. And he wasn't afraid to goad him and hold him accountable and push and prod him towards that. And that's really, I mean, Wes Unseld, Michael Malone gives him a lot of credit for the actual defensive principles in place. And so, Malone calls himself a defensive coach, but to be honest, I don't necessarily think you're seeing that tactically. I just think you're seeing that in, this is a group who doesn't have great defensive personnel, and yet here they are defending at a high enough level to compete with the best teams in the league. And it's all from this standpoint of, we want to play hard for this guy. He's earned that.
All right, Vote. So which sport do you think puts the most pressure on their head coach?
So it's locally, it has to be football, but I wonder, like Zach, I was going to ask you, a lot of that is because in this town, it's a football town, and you don't get a very long leash. And so, how much of that is natural to the sport versus like a particular kind of pressure with a team that wins a lot? Because football and baseball, I actually think, are the two sports I would put up there.
Really?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think I'd go football and baseball as well. And I thought AJ was going to make this more of a fiery conversation. Him and I going back and forth with football. And I thought that's why he was so excited. But I agree with both of you guys saying that it is football, because not only does football have that ego management. Look at Vic Fangio, what he's done with Von Miller the past year and a half, really pushing him, grinding him like no other coach has. Whether that's right or wrong, we honestly may never be able to see if Vic Fangio's handling of Von Miller was right or wrong, with Von not playing this season, very likely. But you also see with Gary Kubiak and the 2015 Super Bowl run, how he managed Peyton Manning. That was one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen. It was the best coaching job I've ever seen from the Broncos with the way he managed him. And that had nothing to do with the X's and O's on the field. But then with football, you have those X's and O's. You have all of the game week preparation. But then in the game, your head coach is likely calling half of the game, likely calling either the offense or the defense. There are a few coaches that are hands off with that, but most of the time these guys do call the plays as well. And you're calling plays all the time instead of just it all being on, LeBron James going down the court and he's the guy when he's got the ball. You don't need a coach to do anything. Even if you have Tom Brady, you're still having the play called into him. So I just think that football takes cake with this one, plus all the game management stuff as well, which Broncos fans are very familiar of these last few weeks.
Timeouts.
To have to manage the clock, like Zach really even just scratched the surface of everything a football coach has to keep track of. And I know it's your job and you have to delegate appropriately, but it's funny how many head coaches struggle with time management. And when you think about it, it's probably low on their totem pole, despite how important it is.
Exactly. It's low on their totem pole. And here's the thing, you said delegate. That's honestly what I think they should do, and that's what a lot of coaches have done, and that's what the Broncos have done in the past. The Broncos got rid of their game management guy after this last season. So week 1, when they had that game management snafu, was the first game that the Broncos didn't have someone just devoted to that, and it looked like that was pretty important against the Titans.
Do you think that game was more of game management? Or was that just he thought that the kicker was going to miss again? He was just relying on that.
Well, I think that's silly if you're going to rely on someone to miss it, which is what he said.
Silly.
No, yeah,
But
I'm agreeing with you. Exactly. I think that's just a silly thing to do with a potential Hall of Fame kicker. And now he was really cold. But man, that's not a smart thing to do. And he did admit his mistake the following day after saying that he did think Gostkowski was going to miss. He did come back and say, I thought he was maybe going to miss when they were far away from the end zone. But then once they got closer, I made a mistake, messed up. And I think that it's important for a head coach, no matter what the sport is, when they mess up, to take accountability, because regardless of the sport, these guys know when their coach messes up and they're calling out their players when they mess up. So I think that's a very important thing of a head coach, is when you do mess up in such a public, blatant way, that you fall on the sword for it, because then your players, I think, respect you a little more.
All right, Drew. What about you? Give us a little rundown of what a manager does in baseball.
Oh, okay.
A little for people who don't watch baseball, and then we can go into your thoughts on who puts the most pressure.
Yeah, this conversation gets really complicated in a lot of different ways, because what a baseball manager does is both evolving very rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years, and it can vary from team to team, depending on how much.
There's a puppy!
Sorry, Drew, I knew this was
That's fine. Got to spice up the baseball conversation. Got to bring a puppy on here. So. But yeah, depending on how involved your GM or your analytics department is in making in-game decisions, can dramatic. Like, it used to be that you could at least look at a handful of decisions every single game and say, the manager made that decision. He decided that reliever was going to come into the game at that time. But that's not even true anymore. A lot of times those decisions are made before the game even starts. There's a real famous scene in the Moneyball movie where Brad Pitt kind of storms into Philip Seymour Hoffman's office and says, I want this guy doing this. I want this guy to be the first guy out of the pen, because if you don't play the team the way it's designed, it doesn't matter. And so there's this constant sort of back and forth relationship that has to exist between a front office and a manager and the analytics department and all of that stuff for them to make every decision they make. So how much of it do you put on the manager has just become a far more complicated question than it used to be. And they've got a certain amount of ego management that they have to deal with as well, because of a 162 game season typically, or to put another way, actually something that was the same this year, and every single day season, these guys are around each other when they're playing baseball, they see each other way more than they see their families or anybody else. That's just the nature of the beast. And you've got to be somebody who makes sure that your team doesn't naturally start to hate each other. Well, we don't have time to dive into all of that right now. But basically, to get to the second part of the question, I think that's what makes it. If I could do a very like lawyerly, philosopher, like politician-y thing here, and since I think everybody's answered the question the way most people would define the word pressure correctly, football coach has the most pressure because they should, because they have the most control. But that's what they're hired to do: call plays, make those decisions, do all that stuff. A baseball manager's pressure comes from getting a great deal of criticism from people that largely have no idea what information you have access to, what decisions you are or are not making, where does the buck actually stop, what are you saying or doing with these guys. That, how much credit does Bud Black get for the fact that the Rockies have the best starting pitching over the last 4 years that they've ever had in their history? And how much blame does he get for the fact that the bullpen is an absolute dumpster fire disaster? And that's a very difficult question to answer. So there's people out there calling for his job right now, and it makes a certain amount of sense. The team has played under their talent level. They've been disappointing for 2 consecutive years. And in any other sport, you'd have to look at the manager and say, you don't meet your talent expectations, then that's a lack of leadership, and that's on the manager. But I think rightfully so in baseball, and right now more people are pointing at the general manager.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like I see a lot more hate towards Jeff Bridich, and more people saying he needs to go. Of course, that could be because of the Nolan Arenado
a lot of
clash
that is
they
personal.
had.
Yes, a lot of that in that specific case is personal, and people just like Bud Black and they dislike Jeff Bridich. But some of that is legitimate too. That's just the nature of, like, Bud Black didn't put together that bullpen. Right. He's not the one who threw together, a group where Daniel Bard, who was a coach last year, is legitimately the best guy.
Incredible.
In the bullpen. Like, that's not Bud Black's fault. And there's nothing he can do. And I get these questions now every night, and he goes and gets someone. It's a tie game in the 7th, and he goes and grabs somebody. And that guy comes in and gives up 3 runs. Why did he go to Jairo Diaz or Carlos Estevan? Because he's got 8 pitchers to choose from, and 7 of them are struggling. And that's that is not his fault. And so it's very difficult to say how much of these last, but I don't think that zero blame goes on Bud Black for these last 2 years either. And so that's where I think, for me, I think of pressure. I've got a certain amount of pressure every single day to talk about the Colorado Rockies, whether they're winning or they're losing or, whatever. But I feel like that's within my realm of what I'm supposed to do. When the MLBPA and the commissioners start fighting with each other over the collective bargaining agreement, and I'm like, man, I should have gone to law school. I feel a little more out of my own. I feel pressure to do something that I don't feel like I'm necessarily supposed to be or capable of doing, but to try to, sure. That to me is a different kind of. So, yeah, football coaches have more pressure, but they also have more control over the outcome of how people view them, where baseball managers have almost none and still are expected to do a very complicated and intense job. I don't think they're under the most pressure. I think baseball managers have the most thankless of all of the head coaching manager positions.
Which do you guys think, which sport has the quickest trigger? I feel like it's football and basketball, but I would admit to being naive in the NHL in this arena. But it seems to me like football, like especially if you're in like Denver, or a city or a market like this, like 2 weeks in, if it's below expectations, the conversation starts.
Yeah, I completely agree. With the Broncos, like you guys said, there's just so much pressure there. And that's not the best thing ever, is when fans are calling for jobs, right? I mean, we've seen with Malone, how many times could they have fired Michael Malone from how, many questionable decisions he's made? And this year, just leading up to the playoffs.
During the playoffs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's crazy, man. And I think Drew mentioned a good point. Like, I think all of these guys are getting criticized by, like, the average sports viewer is like 10 times more intelligent and well equipped to analyze and make armchair decisions than they were just 10 years ago. But we don't know more than these guys. And more to the point, like the coaching process, it sounds like in all of these sports, a lot of it happens behind closed doors. And so we just don't know. You know what I mean? And I just can't imagine being criticized by people. Sorry, I'm almost done. That have really
she
no clue
wants
what they're
attention. Go give your dog attention. AJ, Brendan said he doesn't really know how that plays in the NHL. What would you respond to that?
Now he'll never know.
No, he has AirPods. He can hear.
No, honestly, like you get time. Like Jared Bednar survived a 48-point season. You know, his first ever NHL coaching season. His team lost 60 games. So if he was able to survive that, and there were a lot of things that went wrong that year. And I think you're seeing on the other side, your patience continues to get rewarded here. And it's amazing to me because there are bad organizations out there that are constantly recycling.
Yes.
And it's like, you have to understand this is part of your culture problem, is that you are constantly recycling these guys in and out. 100%. So you have a different message every year. You have a different voice. You have a different leader. And you're like, oh, we need you guys to buy into this. And then guys are like, okay, well, now there's a new guy in that office every single year.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. I'm getting the hell out of here my first opportunity. You know, like it just creates a toxic culture when you're constantly recycling. Like, there isn't a single good organization out there that you can point to that's like, oh yeah, they get away with this. It just doesn't happen. Well, like, so the NHL, you usually get like 2 to 3 years. I would say you probably get through a 3-year deal, and then by year 3, you usually have a decent idea of this guy can do the job. This isn't working.
AJ, you saying that just reminded me of college football and the Buffs and just the trouble that I feel like they are having and are going to have with 3 different head coaches in just 4 years, and someone like Mel just picking up and leaving, and all these recruits, and then they're younger, they're more impressionable, all these things. It's just, goodness, it made me sad. It reminded me of the misery of being a Buffs fan that I choose to endure every time.
I mean, to AJ's point on the Nugget side of the aisle, Michael Malone was fired in Sacramento after doing as good a job as one could do in a bottom-of-the-barrel organization in terms of incremental improvement. Only coach DeMarcus Cousins ever liked there. And they fired him. And they just, the losing culture those gears kept turning. Josh Kroenke, to his credit, showed an unordinary amount of patience. And it's paid off. And so much like Bednar, it's just the longer leash these guys have been given, the more they've proved that they are the right guys for the job. And it's funny to watch the bottom tier organizations in these leagues respectively not understand that, like, if you have an arduous rebuild task, like, it's not going to happen overnight, and there's no hire you're going to make that's going to flip that switch for you in one season.
Before we keep this conversation going, I got to tell the good folks listening about DraftKings Sportsbook. Week 2 of football is in the books, and now it's time to review the tape and get ready for Week 3. There's no place to get in on all of the action than DraftKings Sportsbook. They are giving all new users a chance to turn $1 into $100 when they bet on any team. And guys, I'm proud to say that I officially put a deposit in. I am starting betting. I was a little nervous about it. Everyone here loves it, talks about it all the time. I obviously tell you guys to do it, but I just wasn't sure if I was ready. And you know, we're gonna play some bets. We're gonna try and make some money.
It's big stuff. No, it's
catch us that $1 from you.
Exactly. I'm gonna try $1 to get $100, and then I'll be in, and I'll just keep going. But
I bet you're not putting that $1 on the Eagles.
Nice. Hey now, hey, the Broncos are. You putting your dollar on Jeff Driscoll? Did I pronounce that?
Yes, you did.
Absolutely not.
No, I don't think I'm going to put my money on football because it just brings sadness, as we learned this weekend. Maybe Nuggets. we'll see. I'll let you guys know what I end up placing my bet on, and if I actually win, because this could be I lose all the money I put in a deposit, and I'm just like, maybe this wasn't for me, or I love it and keep going.
And the first one's always a big one.
Yep. So
like download the first baseball game, they lose 14-2. I'm never going to another one of these ever.
In extra innings, make it that, and you're just like, oh god.
Stayed here for 4 hours in the rain.
Or in the snow, as Colorado has snow games sometimes.
A couple of those.
Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code DNVR when you sign up to get this can't-miss offer. Oh, you can place the same on UFC. I was getting into UFC before sports came back, so maybe I'll watch UFC and place a bet on that one this weekend. But pick any team during week 3, bet $1 on them, and win $100 if they win. That's $1 to win $100. If you're new to betting like I am, check out our explainers that break down the best ways to bet, team totals, props, futures, the spread. They've got it all. They've got you covered, Andre and Ryan. For a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook, use code DNVR during signup. Must be 21 or older. Colorado only. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, be sure to call 1-800-522-4700. I feel like I just talked a lot. I need another sip of my beer. Continuing the conversation from the first segment about pressure on head coaches, I feel like we all picked the Broncos in football as that number one team. And I think John Elway isn't really giving Vic Fangio, the decisions John Elway has made is making it harder for Vic Fangio. With all of John Elway, and correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, but John Elway is just constantly trying to deny the fact that this team needed to rebuild. He kept making decisions on win now, win now, win now. And when your head coach then uses those decisions you make and doesn't win, then the fan base, of course, and I know a lot of the fan base is also turning on John Elway and saying it's time for him to go as well, but it just didn't put Vic Fangio in the best position when John Elway can't admit to this team needing to rebuild and move forward that way.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it also really hurt Vance Joseph as much as people want to put all the blame on Vance Joseph, and he's a great scapegoat to point to. But when you have high expectations and you don't have a quarterback, hey, that's going to kill a head coach. And John Elway hasn't had the quarterback. He has not brought in the quarterback for his head coach. And as great as it would be to be able to win without a quarterback, that is so difficult. You can do it for 1 year. Look, the Broncos did it in 2016. They had a winning record, came a couple Benny Fowler drops away from actually making the playoffs with Trevor Siemian as their quarterback. But so you can do it for one. You can do it for 1 year, but you can't do it for a sustained amount of time like the Broncos have tried to do these past 4 years. The Broncos have tried to get quarterbacks, and I put try in air quotes because Joe Flacco isn't really trying. Case Keenum, when they're paying him $18 million, is actually in the bottom 10 of quarterback money. So the $18 million in the NFL for a quarterback is nothing.
That was the worst one, right? Case Keenum was the worst one of all of them, because the other guys were at least like these young dudes you could hang. When you're looking at Simeon and Pack, I know AJ's like, no, we knew those guys up too. There was at least the youth.
That is bad.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say Paxton's probably the worst there, and it's not a surprise when you draft a quarterback in the 20s. That's pretty much destined to fail. So they didn't really. John never really did anything to truly get a quarterback.
Sanchez. I forgot about Sanchez.
He probably forgot about his Denver time too.
Totally forgot.
Well, let's take this opportunity to just jump into the present, and the Broncos take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday, 2:25 p.m. at Mile High. AJ, big sigh from you there. The Broncos are 0-2.
Yep.
It's not looking good. I mean, the DNVR bar has been fun every Sunday, so if you still want to have fun, even if your team isn't doing well, come here because we still have a blast. But Zach, how are you feeling about this game? Do you think there's a chance Jeff Driscoll pulls off a win?
Yeah, I mean, this is the David versus Goliath story right here. And in fact, if the Broncos win, you may need to change it to the Driscoll versus Brady story, because I cannot believe the Broncos are only 6-point underdogs. I know they're at home. There's 5,700 fans. I think that means nothing. When there was 500 fans for game one, it was like I could barely see fans. So 10 times that, maybe you'll be able to see them. I don't think that's going to make a difference. So yeah, you do have the mile high air, but for Tom Brady, I don't think that's going to affect him. I know he's 4-7 all time in Denver, but to not even be a touchdown favorite, I think I don't know what they're looking at, honestly. I could see that being the line if Drew Lock was the quarterback and he was healthy, but Jeff Driscoll, he really impressed me last week. I do have to say, I just don't see that happening game after game after game. Now, maybe if he plays 5 games and he has 2 good games, including last week, sure, he could have another good one this week. I don't think he's going to be as crisp as he was last week. And you're going up against Tom Brady, who has struggled, but you don't have Von Miller. You have Bradley Chubb playing at like 75, 80%. So you're going to need a massive game from Jarrell Casey in the middle to get pressure on Tom. And I just think that may be too much on anyone's shoulders.
Do you think they're 6-point underdogs just thinking of last game? They kept it close, even though the impossible happened. Like their starting quarterback went down. Cortland Sutton was out half the game. Jerry Jeudy was out half the game. They're like trying to not count them out. That's why they're just 6-point underdogs instead of more.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I didn't really know that Vegas. Yeah, I guess Vegas takes into account heart, which I didn't really know that they did that. Okay. I mean, the Broncos are 2-0 against spreads so far, despite being 0-2.
All right, so
that's a thing. Hey,
they've got that.
They've got that going for them.
Gonzalez going out and giving the Rockies a quality start after he put 12 guys on base in the first 3 innings yesterday, and fans being like, "Hey, you might be okay." It's like, no, no, he's not. They got it through a game. I love you, Jeff Driscoll. I've known about you for 5 or 6 days now, and seemed like
cheers to you. Is that what you were doing, Drew?
I want to believe in you.
It's that line from Field of Dreams. Watch out, you don't get killed.
Well, Zach, let's touch a little bit on these injuries. I don't know what Denver Sports, I said this in our breakdown, but I don't know what Denver Sports did to the injury gods. And it's not just Broncos, because the entire NFL is really struggling with these injuries. But man, the Broncos just got hit so hard. The Avs got hit hard. The Nuggets got hit hard. The Rockies even got hit hard. It's just goodness, they can't catch a break. But Zach, do you think some of these injuries do play a role because of the lack of preseason?
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. And the lack of the offseason. We had someone on our podcast earlier this week say, how they don't just go in April and May and do the same type of workouts. No, it's slowly progressing their bodies in certain steps. And they didn't have any of that this year. So I do think that's crucial. And then you don't have preseason. You kind of have a shortened training camp with not as much of a ramp-up period as you like. And a great example is the Broncos signed Mark Barron, and then 2 days into practicing, he hurts his hamstring just because, they were like, Mark, we need you to play. Well, he wasn't able to do any conditioning programs with teams in the offseason. And so he goes out there, goes too fast and pulls a hamstring. And I think that's kind of a good example of what we've seen from the rest of the NFL.
Zach, do you think the Broncos will win? Just give me straight yes or no.
No, I don't think they cover.
What do you think what are you going for score prediction?
I'm going something like 27-16, and I even find it hard to think the Broncos are going to score 16 points.
Wow. Okay. Well, go listen to the Broncos pod. I think I think Mason Ryan had a little bit more optimism. But we're keeping it real, and with this Broncos team and all the injuries.
Journalism on this podcast.
There you go. Vote. Let's jump right in onto some Nuggets. Down 3-1 again. Western Conference Finals. Right where we've been. How are you feeling? What did you think of last night's game? I know you guys didn't want to touch much on the post-game show about the officiating, but it has been such a big conversation, not just from Nuggets fans. fans of the NBA are upset with what happened. LeBron James and the Lakers sent a letter into the league stating that he wasn't getting enough free throws, and he went from 7 to 14 last night's game. Do you think that played a big role in the loss?
I mean, it played a role. And look, every team does what the Lakers did. What's unfortunate is the Lakers, for some reason, leaked that. And then it goes public, which is not a good look for them or LeBron. Like, I'm not sure why. You know, maybe they didn't leak it. Maybe someone got the story, but it certainly feels like it got out there really quick. You know, the Nuggets actually just did the same thing after this last game. They sent in a tape to the league. They're going to ask them to reassess. So teams certainly do this. But when you shoot 14 free throws after a leaked story about your official complaint for your superstar, it's going to be part of the story. I just think from the perspective of, like, look, our fandom bleeds into our coverage at DNVR, and I think that's fine in the realm of sports, but I think it can be a rough look when you're the home media and you just want to harp on officiating.
Definitely.
Especially when the Nuggets gave up 25 second chance points. And so from a head coach perspective, there are controllable factors here that led to that loss. You know, Jokic wasn't good enough. They weren't good enough on the glass. A rough game for Michael Malone. And yet they were right there. So it's an encouraging game. And I just think that given the way that superstars get calls, games 2 and 3 really weren't that bad. I just don't want to harp on the officiating when, frankly, I think the Nuggets are good enough to beat this team anyway if they play their best.
Jamal Murray has so many highlight reel moments after this series, and that layup against LeBron was amazing. What do you think of his rise into this stardom?
I mean, you just can't say enough. We all were waiting for him to make the leap. You know, some of us weren't sure if he'd get there. We knew he'd get better. He made an even bigger one. I mean, this is superstar level stuff. Some of the stuff he's done in the playoffs, it's like he's on lists with Michael Jordan now. I know there's a neutral court, bubble bump thing here to these stats and these shooting stats, but you'll notice it's Jamal Murray, not the other stars of the league who have been out there in the postseason playing in the same circumstances. He's the one who's vaulted himself to historic levels. The hot shooting is what we're all going to see. These shots are going down now. He's taking these Curry-esque threes, but he's leveled up every aspect of his game. He is at times a plus defender now when he was once a liability. He is growing as a playmaker. And I loved reading this article from Zach Lowe on ESPN about the Jokic-Murray pick and roll and describing them as cerebral guys, that over the course of a series, they download information. They learn how to pick you apart. Maybe it takes you a game or two, but they figure out what you want to do, and they don't let you do it. And so to think of Jamal Murray as a cerebral player when he was once, I think, an instinct scorer, it's just really, really cool. And I don't know if I've ever witnessed, like, he wasn't this player in March. He had a good regular season, but nothing was pointing to this. Yeah. The hiatus comes, and I think we got a glimpse of who took those months, who hunkered down and steeled up mentally and physically, who wanted this. And 12 pounds later, a couple of 50 pieces in the playoffs later, it's pretty clear that Jamal Murray is in that group.
I think Jamal Murray even looks like a bit of a different player from the beginning of these playoffs. Like he has really taken this time in the bubble to his advantage and really just completely stepped up. But do you think they come back once again from 3-1?
I probably not, but I said those exact same words twice now.
True.
So,
yep.
I mean, what is the point in writing them off? I do think they're good enough. Lakers are better. Tough matchup. But I believe the Nuggets are in the same tier as this team. I don't think it's outlandish for them to beat them 3 times in a row. I like them in Game 5.
Yeah.
I think the Nuggets are going to maybe see a friendlier whistle in Game 5. I think Jokic is going to be better. I would expect he's better. And I just think Denver is going to need this game more than LA does. Anthony Davis, you saw him a little hobbled. I think LeBron's looking a little tired. So maybe do they let off the throttle in this one? I think the Nuggets get Game 5. Once you get Game 5, it's 2 more games. And you're just thinking everyone gets tight, and we've been in this situation so many times. I'm sure they're thinking that from their perspective, that they have to have confidence. So they'll take it 1 game at a time. And from that perspective, yes, this team can beat the Lakers.
Drew, last Friday, before the Western Conference Finals started, I asked you how you were feeling. You weren't feeling too great. How are you feeling now?
I want to respect everything that Brendan just said about the officials and stuff. Look, man, I forgot to mention that part. I said this to RK as we were watching game 1 down at the DNVR bar and how uneasy I was feeling about this series. And I had mentioned game 5 in 2009 and how awful the officiating was then, but I neglected to mention the root of my fears about it for this series, which were obviously completely founded in objective and observable fact from every Western Conference Finals that the Lakers have ever played in. And that doesn't just come from somebody who's been a Nuggets fan during my life. It comes from somebody who, before the Nuggets were relevant or ever on television, was a Sacramento Kings fan in 2004 as well. And so the notion that Brendan's a classy guy, and our DNVR Nuggets guys are doing the right thing. And but it absolutely actually drives me up the wall.
But Drew's like, I'm not classy, so
I'm not doing it. You know what? They can call us whatever they want. I don't understand why journalists whose job it is to cover the owner and the GM and all the players and what they're doing sometimes in their personal lives and what their diets are like and the uniforms and the logos and all the other things that we're supposed to cover objectively and just call it right down the line how we see it. And we do have to recognize every conversation we just had about managers and GMs, who made the call. You can place some blame on the manager. You can place some blame on the GM. You still got to place some guy on the guy who threw the pitch or threw the interception or did whatever. And then we have to, for some reason, apply a completely separate principle to observing an objective fact in front of our face about officials. And we do this in an era where multiple huge scandals have broken about NBA officials accepting bribes, MLB umpires accepting bribes, MLB umpires threatening to shoot people. Like, that's a very recent one. And I don't know why collectively, well, I've got some theories, but have just decided, no, that's the third rail. We're not allowed to touch it. We're not allowed to talk about it, because if we do, we'll be called complainers and whiners for pointing out observable, objective facts. We've got the data. We have the ability to measure it. We use the analytics in every other aspect of our lives. And ask us to turn off our brains by these people who are given extraordinary power and zero accountability is, in my mind, absolutely ridiculous.
I'm glad you said it. We have different rules.
I don't get how it's good for the league. I don't get how it's good for any.
Well, it's not. And by the way, like, it's not good. It's not good for the league that the Nuggets now are going to send in a video too. Like it's just tough. I mean, these officials are seemingly stuck at a tug of war. And it's the teams pulling them back and forth. And I think, look, even some of the calls that have gone the Nuggets' way in this series are like, what are we doing? And these two teams are good enough to put on a show. And I just, like, my whole thing with refereeing, and I'm not doing the bias one way or another thing here. I'm not. But my thing with refereeing is, why do I know Scott Foster's name? I shouldn't know who you are, because you shouldn't be a part of this show. And I think some refs struggle with that. Harder gig than we'll ever give them credit for. But to your point, Drew, the benefit of the doubt is thrown out the window when it's not off the table. In fact, it's happened before that we know these guys have not approached this in good faith.
I just don't understand why all of the excuses that we come up with for refs, umpires, whatever you want to call them, don't apply to anybody else in sports. It's a very difficult job. So is playing shortstop. You don't hear me criticizing him. You know, so like again, it's like every little thing, and they talk about, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Actually, there are things you can do about it. Every single offseason, each one of these leagues meets. They clarify rules. They clarify the rule book. Right now in Major League Baseball, there's a huge movement to move toward the electronic strike zone.
Robo Empire
in the minor leagues, and so it's not like a conversation. It's not like there's no debate. I've heard some people say that. It's like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. True. These other things are things you can actually. You can force accountability for those who are supposed to enforce the rules fairly. And if it's not the job of journalists to do that, then whose is it?
Well, we got our rants after all.
There you go. We got Feisty Friday happening. You'll love to see it. AJ, it looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, Drew, can we really be journalists when we're busy selling T-shirts?
Can't do it,
Gotta get that drop in there.
One or the other.
All right, Drew, real quick before we wrap up.
Oh, baseball time.
Baseball time.
Ooh.
Sweet release of death.
Rockies won last night. Hey.
Mm-hmm.
They need 2 more wins to cover something on DraftKings.
Get that DraftKings over, baby.
There you go. Do you think they win 2 more games?
Sure.
Give Ryan hope. He's very depressed about
Senza, Santos, Marquez, and Freeland. Yeah, they'll probably take 3 of these and fall just short of the playoffs. All they need in order to make the playoffs is to sweep the Diamondbacks, have the Giants get swept by the Padres, have the Phillies get swept by the Rays, have the Brewers split or lose their series with the Cardinals, and make sure that the Mets don't sweep the Nationals. And then they're in.
So only that. Only that. AJ.
Pull that off and you're fine. And then you get to play the Dodgers in a best of 3.
Lovely. We love that. Someone asked
That'll go well.
in the comments.
I think they'll get the DraftKings over.
What they said, if y'all have time, what's y'all's feelings on the 60-game season? I personally love it. How do you feel about it, Drew? Now that we're almost done with it.
With the passion of 1,000 fiery suns. There's an entertainment value to it, but you do not and cannot get a reasonable estimation of who the best teams in baseball are over a 60-game sample size. The fact that the Miami Marlins, who had to play like 60 different guys this season, are in the middle of the playoff hunt this year is proof enough of that. I think it was fine for this year. So, I'm not against anything that they've done, but you just need more baseball games. Baseball is incredibly chaotic and random. And in order for all of that stuff to balance out, you got to play a lot of them. And
why?
That's the only way around it.
Seriously, it all goes out the window when you play a 5-game series in the playoffs anyway. So why bother?
What do you mean?
Why not play 120 games?
I think they could.
Why do you got to play 162 of them?
I don't think it necessarily has to be 162. In fact, I would even be in favor, at the very least, of going, because it used to be like 154. I'd be in favor of doing that. There's probably not a difference between those two, but you've got to play at least over 100 baseball games. Even the most advanced analytics that we find will tell you, any given batter, you need at least 300 plate appearances before the data means anything, right? There's just a certain amount of ups and downs that come with any given baseball season, any given baseball player. In a sport where guys who fail 7 out of 10 times are the absolute best of the best, you need time for all of that random failure to balance out. So I think 120 games would maybe even be okay, but then you're starting to push it at that point.
We'll have more time to kind of go more in detail about that later on, maybe in a few weeks. If the Rockies don't make it in, which Drew outlined all of the reasons that they won't. AJ, want to finish up with you. There isn't much hockey talk going on, but we are preparing for a DraftKings. DraftKings is just on my mind, guys. I just need to go place a bet. On draft coverage. AJ, will you tell the good people a little bit about what they should expect for our draft coverage?
Yeah, we're gonna do a whole bunch of work and then watch the Avs trade their first round pick. So,
AJ, I don't need that energy right now.
And then Rudo and I are gonna get drunk on the live stream that night. So come hang out.
That's all I needed for a tagline.
No, but for real, we're preparing a really cool draft show for the first night of the draft. The Avs currently have the 24th pick. So that's a guy that won't be in the NHL for a few years, and if the Avs' recent drafting history is any indication, may not ever be in the NHL. So tempered excitement, but you get to come and hang out as we talk about teenagers like they're farm animals. So it's really awkward and it's a good time, and we give them grades and all of it. It's great.
Your earlier tagline
was
better. Yeah. The tagline from 4, I think, is a better seller than that one.
I'm just saying, it's a really weird, awkward process.
Okay, well,
it's a lot of fun. We're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be entertaining.
We're putting a lot of work in it, and it's gonna be.
We're putting a lot of work into it.
It's going to be a great time, similar to Draft Day Live for the MLB and NFL that we did earlier this year. You guys can catch it on YouTube, Periscope, and Facebook. It's going to be a blast. And if the Nuggets aren't in the Western Conference not in the Western Conference Finals, in the finals, then we'll be having a watch party at the bar. But who knows? They might go and make it through once again, 3-1, come back and be in the finals, and we would have a Nuggets watch party that day. So keep up to date on all of those details on DNVR_Avalanche. Before we get out of here, Green Mountain Dental Group is in Lakewood, and they're the best damn family-owned dentist in the metro area. They're extreme Colorado sports fans just like us. Schedule a cleaning, x-ray, and exam, and you'll receive a free Sonicare toothbrush. Tweet at us when you go and tag us and them, because showing them how this community can support our biggest supporters really helps us out. Green Mountain Dental Group treats you like family, birthday cards, talk to you about what's going on in your life. They're awesome, and they really make you feel like family. Lindsay, our sales director, got her wisdom teeth removed there, and she really enjoyed the experience. I know I say that a lot, as much as you can enjoy getting your wisdom teeth removed. But the first step to good health is taking care of your teeth. So don't forget, you can receive a free Sonicare toothbrush when you go and you schedule a cleaning, x-ray, and exam. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Feisty Friday did not disappoint from Drew, from AJ. We got it all. We will see you guys next week. And don't forget to stop by the DNVR bar this weekend. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Go Nuggets.